have come to the realization that with what I've had to say so far about Bridgerton season 3 and how a lot of it is driven by changes made by the writers and showrunners off of events from the books, the assumption some of you all might have gotten might be that maybe I don't like the Bridgerton show as an adaptation. And I felt the need to clarify that because personally, I really do think that Bridgerton, based off of what it is working with, is a good adaptation. It's not the best, mind you. It's not the best that we could have absolutely hoped for. But based off of the 5 parameters which I like to judge my book to movie or show adaptations of, and I'm sure you all have noticed, but there has been a whole lot of those of late. Like, Hollywood can't come up with an original thought or concept for a film or a show, but that's a conversation for another day. And my brain is trying to do that thing again where it gets distracted by a shiny thought and I go off on a tangent, and we are not going to allow that happen because the focus is on the very important question of, is Bridgerton a good adaptation? Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned the parameters I personally like to employ when I'm judging an adaptation of a book I'd previously read and enjoyed. And for me, those parameters are: 1. The actors casted for the roles. 2. The chemistry they have with each other. 3. The adaptation's attempts to flesh out the world and the characters from the source material in a way that adds to their believability and makes the world feel even more lived in and the characters even more relatable to me as an audience. 4. Whether or not the adaptation leans into the strength that film lends to it compared to a novel format. For example, the visual language employed by the director, the cultivated soundtrack and how it adds to the story. Hell, even little things like design choices and color palettes can go a long way for me. For example, the 2020 film Emma, starring Anna Taylor-Joy, was just such a visually stunning film that used color as an added language to tell the story of Emma and her character arc and journey throughout the entire film that I absolutely fell in love with it. Definitely one of my absolute favorite Jane Austen adaptations. And finally, does the adaptation maintain the spirit and soul of the source material? And this last one is especially important for me as it is central to how the finished product looks, and the only way in which fans can get a sustained story that doesn't feel like the writers of the adaptation are spitting in our faces for having enjoyed the source material. For an example of writers and showrunners who did most certainly lose track of keeping the soul and source of the source material, please look no further than the absolute garbage and mess that was the Artemis Fowl film, which was absolutely foul. But with the parameters highlighted, shall we then proceed to examine Bridgerton underneath this lens? Starting with the first one, the casting. I mean, the first time we saw Simon, I was screaming, "That is my Duke of Hastings." Phoebe as Daphne didn't quite work for me because Daphne in the book was more tomboyish, which was what led to the men of the ton not being able to see her as a potential partner or wife and why she needed Simon's help in the first place. But I did allow for the change because it was clear that the writers wanted to tweak things slightly to make her more distinct from, say, Eloise and still show the characterization of the burden carried by the eldest daughter of a prominent household like the Bridgertons, who has to be perfect. So, I was perfectly fine with that casting. I was not as impressed with Anthony in the first season because I really hated that beard he had going, and the part of me wondered how on earth the show planned to redeem him and make him a believable, swoon-worthy romantic partner in a season because I just couldn't see it then. But I was proven quite wrong because by the gods, Anthony Bridgerton had quite the glow up. My gods. And of course, Kate and Edwina were spot on with the elegance. Benedict perfectly captures the dreaminess that is the artistic Bridgerton brother. And here is where people might disagree with me because I have read some of your comments, but I do think that the glow up that Colin got in season 3 was really good. It was tanned, more attractive, more confident, and that translated itself into the swagger with which he moved. Swagger gained from him having traveled quite extensively in the period leading up to his season. You might disagree with me, and that is fine. We are all entitled to our opinions, but I thought season 3 Colin worked. Although I really did miss his season 1 air. It was so fluffy. Colin Bridgerton, please, let marital life have convinced you to give us more of that puffy, fluffy look. It was so cute. And of course, Eloise is spot on, and Nicola's Penelope is chef's kiss, as is Polly as Portia, and I prefer Anna as Francesca to Ruby, but that's mostly because we didn't really get to see much of Ruby's Francesca, of course. And we can't forget Golda as Queen Charlotte, or Adjoa as Lady Danbury, or Ruth as Violet. I think we can all collectively agree that with regards the casting of these actors and how they were able to bring these characters to life, the show did an absolutely phenomenal job in that regard. And then there's the chemistry. And in this regard, I always look at the chemistry from two angles, especially if it is an adaptation of a romance novel. The first is, of course, the very obvious one, the romantic and sexual chemistry between the actors playing the role. Because I do think that both are important when they are to play characters who are paired up together and are meant to convince us, the audience, that they are in a relationship together. They need to be able to bounce off of each other and give the audience the pining and yearning and absolute hunger that is necessary for a romance story to work. And for that, the romantic and sexual chemistry has to hit hard. If either of this is missing, things kind of fall flat, which thankfully wasn't the case with Bridgerton, as whether it is Saphne or Canthony or Georgette and to some extent Pauline, we get that. And I say to some extent Pauline because, like I've mentioned in some of my videos, Pauline was a bit shortchanged and sidelined in their season, so we weren't able to fully enjoy that aspect of their relationship as much as I would have liked. But we do know that the chemistry is there, because look at Nicola's press run leading up to the release of season 3 was fire. For everyone that claims that Pauline didn't really deliver on the heat for the season, I like to point to the press run as the concrete proof that these two actors really do work amazingly well together. And what led to a lot of people feeling dissatisfied, myself included, is because their characters were not given the time they needed to cook and bring all the heat. But it was all there, just waiting for the space to show us. Which is why I do believe season 4 might actually help feed us some Pauline, and I would appreciate the crumbs we get, even as I cry at what could have been if only they were given the room to be. And of course, I'm sure it goes without saying, but George and Charlotte's chemistry together was off the charts. Absolutely incredible work from India and Corey in that regard. Absolutely smoking. But away from the romantic and sexual chemistry, there's also the general chemistry that needs to exist among the cast themselves as they best inhabit their roles in the show. Each of these characters have interactions with each other that go beyond the romance, and these interactions are fueled and best served by the ease with which they relate to one another. The Bridgertons need believable chemistry with each other to help us as the audience believe that indeed they are siblings. Eloise and Penelope require us as the audience to believe that they really have been childhood friends who get each other, and that requires chemistry. Hell, that scene of one of the young ladies of the town who had previously complained about being unhappy, telling the other young ladies about how she followed everything her mother said to the letter, a declaration that had Eloise subtly mocking her and stating the very obvious, which in turn caused Pen to have that quick smile, is everything we needed to know about how the one person who really does understand and appreciate Eloise's acerbic wit is her best friend. It's a clear indicator of the brilliant chemistry that Nicola and Claudia have together. Every time we see the characters gather together in a room or at an event, what pulls us as the audience into the scene is what is happening, sure enough, but it's also their chemistry with each other that always elevates the scene. And I do think that all of this boils down to casting as well, because it is one thing to cast someone who looks and talks the part, but it is another thing to cast someone who is able to do all of that and at the same time be believable in a scene with their fellow actor. And this might seem like I'm stating the obvious, but for me, it can make or break an adaptation. For example, there was zero crumbs of chemistry to be had between Dakota and Jamie in 50 Shades of Grey. Matter of fact, I can't for the life of me think of anybody in that trilogy who had chemistry with each other. It was just so soulless and drab. But that's just me, of course. If you found them sizzling on screen, good for you. You do you and like what you like. No judgment here whatsoever. And then there's the third parameter, which is how successfully the show as an adaptation is able to flesh out its world and its characters. Now, in my the reasons why I thought Bridgerton season 3 sucked video, I did raise the issue of the bloat. And it occurred to me after I'd made and uploaded the video that viewers might have thought I had a problem with the bloat. I did not. In a world as big as Bridgerton, us getting to see these characters as fully realized people who aren't just existing on the sidelines waiting for their curtain call for them to do their thing and then exit is one of the strongest points of the show as an adaptation for me. I love how much depth was given to the Featheringtons, especially Portia. I love how we got to pull back the curtains for Cressida and how the Mondriches tied into the theme of what would you sacrifice in order to keep your place in the ton that was going on in season 3, which I did make a video to that regard if you haven't watched it yet. I might leave that in the description box, the Mondriches video. But as I was saying, I did enjoy the extras put in because it does help populate the world of Bridgerton and make it more lived in, which is something I enjoy about adaptations. Because novels are often very focused on the main characters and their thought processes as they navigate the situations and the emotional weight it brings by virtue of the plot that is tossed their way. We rarely ever get the chance to see things from the perspective of those who aren't the main characters. Those characters aren't a priority for the writers since they do not serve the story in the same way the protagonist does, since it is through the protagonist and their eyes that we get to experience the novel and the story being told to us. So, side characters often get sidelined in the novel format, and we're okay with that for that format. Television and movies or film in general, however, has the chance to pull the curtains further back and give us a much broader view of the world and the characters in it because everybody is the main character in their own story, and film is a really great medium to communicate that effectively to the audience. What makes this entire bloat with Bridgerton frustrating, however, is the fact that they have crafted this interesting and immersive world, populated with interesting characters, and yet still bind themselves to their 8 episodes a season format that just doesn't work for an ensemble cast the size of theirs. It is an absolute travesty that does a disservice to just how much they've brought all of these characters to life. If there is anything I hope and pray for in season 4, 5, 6, and hopefully we get season 7 and 8 as well, it is that Netflix finally lets go of the shackles of the miserly 8 episodes and give us more time to really get to enjoy this world that Shondaland has put so much into crafting. Like, come on. And then there's how Bridgerton does lean into the benefits it has as a visual medium. There's the balls and the gowns. I mean, all we have to see is the edge of a dress and we could totally tell at a glance that that was yet again Portia having forced pen into an ill-fitted yellow dress because she thinks the color is a happy one and would serve her daughter well. Unfortunately, it doesn't, but it is a very vivid bit of visual storytelling that we get to experience and enjoy on screen. And of course, it's Regency England and the height of the London season. So having the ladies and gentlemen all show up to grand balls and promenade is all a feast for our eyes that we get to see on film. And then there is the iconic choice of turning a string orchestra covering pop songs as the background music to the show. I know when we first got it in season 1, some people had a problem with it and thought it was too cheesy. I, on the other hand, have loved it ever since and saw it as a very obvious nod and a way for the show to put a stamp on how it would go as an adaptation. Because with the music choice, it gets to tell us that it's giving a more modern, fun take on the historical Regency romance, and that what we were getting was an adaptation that wasn't going to be a stodgy, boring one, but one that was way more fun. And honestly, it was a premise that the show did deliver on. And finally, there is a very important requirement, which is that the adaptation has to respect and maintain the spirit of the source material. And I do think we can agree that Bridgerton as a show does mostly respect its source material. Even when they do occasionally make decisions that stray a bit from the books, they still keep to the spirit of things, which is that Bridgerton at its core is a romance story set in Regency England about a family, and we are all here for a good time, which the show tries its best to deliver on. Now, if they can fix their pacing, and also give us more episodes so they can fully explore these characters and bring them to us, then all would most certainly be all right with my world. But that's just me, of course. Would love to hear your thoughts as well. Do you agree that Bridgerton is a good adaptation, or do you object to my stance on this? Please let me know in the comments. Hit the like button if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this video if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.